Lucas was just 8 years old when everything he knew was ripped away. Chicago's bustling streets were a stark contrast to the quiet, broken home he'd once known. His father had vanished years earlier, leaving only questions and empty spaces. His mother, cold and distant, had abandoned him on the corner of a busy street, a helpless child left to navigate a world that was anything but kind. She had always been neglectful, and their home was a place filled with violence, arguments, and bitter silence. Lucas had never been the priority. It was always about her, and when she finally decided she couldn't take it anymore, she just left him there. No explanation, no goodbye. She disappeared into the shadows of the city, leaving Lucas alone in the chaos of Chicago's unforgiving streets. The streets were cruel, but Lucas learned quickly how to survive. He found food when he could, hid when he had to, and avoided the police, who were a constant reminder of how easy it was to be invisible. But the hardest part of every day wasn't the hunger or the cold, it was the loneliness. He thought about Sophia, his sister. She'd disappeared when he was too young to understand. The thought of her, wherever she was, consumed him. Every night, as he curled up in an alley or under a bridge, he wondered where she was. What happened to her? Was she okay? But he had no answers. No one cared enough to give him any. The only thing that kept him going was the hope that one day he would find her. That hope was the only thing that kept the dark thoughts at bay. Despite everything, he never stopped believing that one day they'd be together again. By the time Lucas was 12, the streets of Chicago had become both his prison and his teacher. His childhood, if it could be called that, had been stripped away, replaced by survival. He had learned how to stay out of sight, how to find food, how to protect himself from the dangers that lurked in every shadow. But more than that, Lucas had learned to live with the emptiness that gnawed at him. He was an invisible boy to the world, but inside, the pain of abandonment, of being forgotten, festered. Every day he saw families walking by, mothers holding their children's hands, children laughing, unafraid, and each time it reminded him of what he had lost, his family, the one thing every kid should have. He remembered his mother's face, but it was a ghost to him now. He could still recall the sound of her voice when she'd scold him, the way she'd look at him with tired eyes. He had tried to make sense of it, to understand why she had left him, but nothing about it made sense. But what hurt most was not knowing what happened to Sophia, his little sister, the one person who had meant the world to him. She had vanished when he was still too young to fully grasp what it meant to lose someone. The last memory he had of her was her tiny hand in his, the warmth of her touch. And then, just like that, she was gone. No one had explained why or how. No one cared to tell him what had happened. Lucas had never stopped thinking about her, never stopped hoping that one day, somehow, he'd find her again. But as the years passed, the hopelessness of it all began to settle in. Every person who walked past him, every empty night he spent in the streets, it all felt like another reminder that she was lost to him. The loneliness became unbearable. It wasn't just the hunger or the cold, it was the fact that no one in this world cared about him. No one knew his name. He was nothing, forgotten. His anger, buried deep for years, started to bubble to the surface. Why had his mother left him? Why had Sophia been taken? Why had everyone who was supposed to protect him abandoned him? Lucas's life took a sharp turn on a cold autumn afternoon when he was 18. It had become a routine: scavenge for food, sleep in hidden corners, and avoid being noticed. He had stopped wondering if things could get better. Life had simply become about survival. But that afternoon, while sifting through a garbage bin behind a cafe, Lucas found something that would change everything. A magazine. Its pages were crinkled and torn, but one caught his eye. He flipped it open without much thought, until a photo jumped out at him. There, smiling brightly, was a woman. She looked so familiar. His heart stopped as he stared at the picture. It was Sophia. The young woman was standing with a family, her arms around them as if they were her own. She was dressed in clothes far more expensive than anything Lucas had ever worn. She looked happy. The headline next to her picture read, "Young woman overcomes adversity, finds success." The words blurred in his vision as his heart began to race. His mind couldn't process it at first. Sophia, his sister, a family. She had been taken from him, vanished into the world, and now, here she was, alive, thriving, and surrounded by a loving family. Lucas felt a rush of emotions: betrayal, confusion, anger. He had never been told where she went. He had never known what happened to her. And now, after all these years, there she was, living a life he could barely imagine. How could they keep her from him? How could they never tell him where she was? He was furious. His hands shook as he gripped the magazine. The pain of his years on the streets, the isolation, the hunger, The endless search for a family he would never find suddenly felt like a betrayal in itself. The thought that Sophia was living in some luxurious world, surrounded by love and care, while he had to fight for every scrap of food was unbearable, but now he knew she was alive and he was going to find her. He folded the magazine and shoved it into his backpack. There was no turning back now. He wasn't going to let the years slip by without an answer. He would find Sophia no matter what it took. He didn't know where to start, but he would start somewhere. He would have to. Determined to find Sophia, Lucas threw himself into the search with a ferocity that surprised even him. For the first time in years, he felt something other than the cold grip of loneliness. Hope, though fragile, had ignited a fire within him, something he hadn't felt since he was a child. The magazine photo was proof. She was out there somewhere. He just had to find her. He started his search in the only place he knew well, the streets. It was all he had. Chicago, the city he'd come to know inside and out, became both his ally and enemy. He visited shelters, spoke to the homeless, asked around at bus stations, and wandered through neighborhoods where he had seen affluent families. He felt lost, but he couldn't stop. Each day brought new frustrations and dead ends. There were people who seemed to know something, but no one would speak openly. Doors were slammed in his face or worse ignored. The police were no help. He was just another kid from the streets, invisible and forgotten. One person even told him to stop asking about rich people's kids. The words stung, but Lucas wasn't deterred. Each door that shut in his face made him more determined. As he walked through the neighborhoods where the wealthy lived, it felt surreal. The towering buildings, the pristine cars, the houses that seemed to shine under the sun. It was a world Lucas could never have imagined, one that he couldn't even dream of. He felt like an intruder, but that didn't matter. He wasn't going to stop until he found Sophia. His nights were spent under bridges, in the same dark alleys he had known all his life. But his thoughts were no longer about how to survive from one day to the next. They were consumed with one question: where was she? As the days turned into weeks, the frustration mounted. The people in the neighborhoods where he searched seemed so different from him, as if they were living in a world completely removed from the one he had known. He started to wonder if Sophia had even thought about him. Was she even looking for him? And yet, the image of her smiling in that magazine photo kept him going. It had to mean something. She was out there living a life of success. She had to know what had happened to him, but no matter how much he searched, the answers seemed just out of reach. Every day felt like an exhausting cycle of questions, with no answers. But Lucas was used to fighting through obstacles. If he had survived this long, he could survive anything. And so he kept going, determined to find Sophia, to understand the story that had been hidden from him for so many years. Weeks passed, and Lucas's search showed no signs of slowing down, though the more he uncovered, the more his reality became tangled in shadows. The anger inside him simmered, burning with each unanswered question. Every dead end felt like another betrayal, another painful reminder that his life had never mattered to anyone. Then, one evening, while flipping through an old police report he'd managed to find at a public library, he stumbled upon something that made his blood run cold. There, buried deep within a stack of papers, was a small detail that had never been shared with him. A document mentioning an adoption. His sister, Sophia, had been adopted by a wealthy family when she was very young. He couldn't believe it at first. Sophia had been taken from him, adopted. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what he was reading. How could this have happened without him knowing? How could someone, anyone, have made such a decision without telling him? His heart pounded in his chest, and he felt the weight of betrayal pressing on him like a ton of bricks. The document suggested that the adoption had been finalized when Sophia was only a toddler, shortly after their mother's abandonment of him. But what disturbed him even more was the name on the paperwork. It wasn't just an adoption, it was arranged through an agency that wasn't exactly known for following the rules. His stomach twisted as the pieces started to fit together in an ugly way. The adoption wasn't some innocent act of charity. No, this was much darker than that. As Lucas dug deeper into his findings, the truth began to unravel. His mother had been involved in something sinister. She had sold Sophia. He wasn't just abandoned by his mother, he was discarded, and his sister was taken away like a possession to be traded. The realization hit him like a freight train. His own mother, who he had once hoped would come back to him, was responsible for ripping his family apart. She had sold Sophia to a group that specialized in child trafficking. It wasn't just an adoption. It was part of something illegal, something horrifying, and he had been left in the dark, alone, never given the chance to find out what had happened to his sister. Lucas's body shook as he processed what he had uncovered. It felt like his world had collapsed around him. His mother, the woman he had once loved and trusted, had sold his sister without a second thought. How could she do that? How could she treat her own children like that? As the shock wore off, rage took its place. The sense of betrayal burned deeper than anything he had ever felt. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. He needed to confront the people responsible, but most of all, he needed to know where Sophia was. She had been taken from him, and he wouldn't stop until he found her. He couldn't. He owed her that much. The quiet streets of Chicago suddenly felt suffocating, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. Lucas knew he was on the edge of something monumental, something that could tear his life apart even more, but he had no choice. He had to keep going. The truth was out there, and he would get to it. The more Lucas uncovered, the darker his path became. Each revelation he unearthed only intensified the rage and confusion that swirled within him. The discovery that his mother had sold Sophia was only the beginning. The deeper Lucas dug into the adoption process, the more the twisted reality of his family's past became clear. He found that the adoption agency involved wasn't just an innocent middleman. It was part of a criminal network that specialized in illegal adoptions, catering to wealthy families who could afford to pay for a child, no questions asked. As he pieced the fragments together, Lucas realized that the network had connections with powerful people, people who were not easily reached or exposed. His mother had been manipulated, or perhaps had willingly played a part in this dark trade. She hadn't just abandoned him, she had abandoned Sophia to a life far removed from anything Lucas could ever have imagined. The sense of betrayal grew with each new fact Lucas uncovered. Sophia's adoption hadn't been a simple procedure. It was carefully planned, executed by people who saw children as property to be sold to the highest bidder. Lucas couldn't reconcile the image of the smiling child in the adoption papers with the memories he held of his sister, a little girl full of life and love. Had she known what had happened to her? Was she part of this cruel plan? Or had she been as much of a victim as he had been, taken from everything she knew without her consent? The more Lucas learned, the more disgusted he became. He spent days tracking down leads, some of which led him to the shady underbelly of Chicago's adoption network. He visited more attorneys, spoke with people who had worked in the system, piecing together what had happened to Sophia. She had been placed with a wealthy family, one that had no idea of the true circumstances surrounding her arrival. They had been told she was a child in need, someone they could rescue, someone they could love. But the truth was much darker than that. The injustice of it all was suffocating. Lucas had been left to fend for himself on the streets, while Sophia had been given a life of comfort. It wasn't fair, it wasn't right, and the anger inside him reached a boiling point. Every step of the journey had led him to this horrifying truth. His mother had betrayed them both. She had chosen Sophia, sold her off to the highest bidder, and left him to survive alone. As the pieces of his past fell into place, Lucas found himself questioning everything he had known. His identity, his family, his very existence. It all felt like a lie. The streets had been his home for so long, but now they seemed empty, devoid of any meaning. What was the point of survival if it had been nothing but a cruel twist of fate? But there was something Lucas couldn't let go of, something that still clung to the edges of his thoughts. Sophia. She had been taken from him, but she was still alive. She was still out there, living a life he could never have imagined. And now, more than ever, Lucas was determined to find her. The revelation of the truth about Sophia's adoption only deepened the chasm of loss he felt, but it also steeled his resolve. He wouldn't stop until he had answers. He wouldn't stop until he found Sophia, no matter the cost. The day Lucas finally found Sophia was a mixture of shock and disbelief. After years of searching, of digging through lies and secrets, he had finally tracked her down. She lived in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Chicago, far removed from the grim reality that had been his life. But finding her didn't bring him the peace he had imagined. No, instead, it was a brutal reminder of everything he had lost. He stood across the street from her house, staring at the grand facade, the neatly manicured lawn, and the expensive cars parked in the driveway. The stark contrast between their lives was impossible to ignore. This wasn't the life of a girl who had once been his sister. This was a life forged by deception and a network of criminals. He had no idea how to approach her, how to make sense of the overwhelming emotions that consumed him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lucas gathered the courage to cross the street and walk up to her front door. He stood there for a moment, hands trembling, heart pounding, before ringing the bell. The door swung open and there she was, Sophia. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw him, a complete stranger standing at her doorstep. She looked at him like he was an intruder, someone who didn't belong, and in many ways, he wasn't wrong. He had no right to be here, not in her life, not in this perfect world she had built. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. "Sophia," Lucas said, his voice shaking. "It's me. It's Lucas, your brother." The words hung in the air, heavy and thick. For a moment, Sophia just stared at him, disbelief in her eyes. She shook her head, taking a small step back. I don't know you," she said, her voice soft, as though she were trying to process what was happening. "I know," Lucas replied, his chest tightening. "You don't remember me, but I remember you. I've been looking for you for years. Do you know what happened to us? Do you know why we were separated?" Sophia looked confused, and for a moment she seemed unsure whether she should shut the door in his face or invite him in. Her hand hovered on the doorknob as she processed his words. I don't know what you're talking about," she said, still not fully comprehending the magnitude of the situation. "I know this is a lot to take in," Lucas said, stepping closer, "but I'm your brother, your real brother, and I've been searching for you. You were taken from me. We were torn apart when we were kids. Do you understand? You were adopted. But it wasn't what you think. It wasn't some happy family story. It was a lie." At the mention of adoption, Sophia's face paled. She stepped back, her mind racing. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, that's not true. I've always known my parents. They've always been my family." Lucas's frustration rose as he reached out, trying to make her understand the truth. "They're not your real family, Sophia. They didn't raise you. They didn't even find you. They paid for you. You were sold. Do you understand? It wasn't a simple adoption. It was a lie, a crime, and I was left to survive on the streets while you were taken away. I need you to hear me." Sophia stumbled back, her hands gripping the doorframe as if she were going to fall. The shock was evident on her face, the confusion swirling in her eyes. "What are you talking about? My parents, they're good people. They love me. They're not your real parents," Lucas shouted, unable to contain his pain any longer. "They didn't save you, Sophia. They bought you, and my mother. She sold you. She sold you for money. She abandoned me. And now, all these years later, I'm still here trying to find you, and you—" He stopped, his voice cracking as the weight of it all hit him. Sophia recoiled, her face turning pale as the truth began to sink in. She looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign that this was some cruel joke, some twist of fate. But there was none. The truth was right in front of her, and the reality of it hit her harder than she ever expected. Her mind raced. She had always known there was something off, a feeling of emptiness she could never explain, but she had never imagined it could be this. "I'm sorry," Sophia whispered, her voice shaking as tears began to well in her eyes. I didn't know. Lucas, though still filled with rage and confusion, softened for a moment. The anger, though burning, couldn't overshadow the sorrow he felt for the girl standing before him. She wasn't to blame. She had been as much a victim as he had, but the injustice of it all still tore at him. "I know," he said quietly, "but we need to talk about this. We need to figure out what happened, what was done to us. We need to understand the truth." The air between Lucas and Sophia was thick with confusion and disbelief. Sophia stood in her doorway, her hand trembling on the handle as the weight of Lucas's words hung over her like a storm cloud. Her world, the one she had known for so long, suddenly felt like a fragile house of cards ready to collapse. The love she had for the parents who raised her, the life she had believed was her own, was now under question. And the stranger in front of her, her brother, was the one who had shattered her world. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt lost. She had always felt a vague sense of emptiness, an ache she couldn't explain. She had assumed it was just the struggle to fit in, to find her place in the world, but now it all made sense. The pieces were falling into place, and the truth was suffocating. Her life, the life of privilege and comfort she had taken for granted, had been built on lies. "Lucas, I don't know what to say," Sophia whispered, her voice shaking. "I've never heard any of this before. My parents, they've always been there for me. They've given me everything. I don't understand. Are you telling me they're not my real parents?" Lucas took a deep breath, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. He could see the pain in her eyes, the confusion, and it cut through him. He knew this wasn't easy for her to hear. It hadn't been easy for him either, to come to terms with the fact that his mother had sold his sister for money, a life of luxury traded for their bond. But she needed to understand the truth. She needed to know what had really happened. "They aren't your real parents, Sophia. They adopted you, but it wasn't the way they told you. It wasn't just about saving you. They paid for you, bought you from the people who took you away from me. My mother sold you. I've spent years trying to find you, and now I've finally found you. only to realize you've been living a lie. The words hit Sophia like a punch to the gut. She took a step back, her mind spinning. The people she had called Mom and Dad were strangers to her, at least not in the way she had thought. The life she had lived, so sheltered and perfect, was tainted by the harsh reality Lucas was exposing. How could they have kept this from her? How could they have let her grow up believing she was something she wasn't? "No," she said, shaking her head, her breath quickening. "This can't be true. I don't know you. I don't know what you want from me. I'm not trying to take anything from you, Sophia," Lucas interrupted, his voice softening. "I'm trying to give you the truth. You deserve to know what happened. You deserve to know why you were taken from me, why we were torn apart. I've been living on the streets for years, while you lived in a house like this." His voice cracked, the weight of it all pressing down on him. Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the tightness in her chest. Her world was crumbling, and she didn't know how to rebuild it. The parents who had raised her with love and care, had they been lying to her all along? Had they known about the trafficking, about the network of criminals that had taken her from her brother? She had no answers, just questions and more questions. "I need to know," Lucas continued, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "I need to know if you're going to help me find the truth. I've been looking for you for so long. You deserve to know what happened to us. I can't do this alone. We have to uncover what they've done." Sophia stared at him, her thoughts racing. She wanted to shut the door on him, to pretend none of this was real. She wanted to believe her life wasn't a lie, but deep down she knew the truth was bigger than her. The nagging emptiness she had always felt, the feeling that something was missing. Maybe this was why. Maybe her past, the life she had been given, wasn't her own at all. She wiped away the tears that had started to well in her eyes, trying to steady herself. "I don't know what to think right now. This is too much. I don't know how to process this, Lucas." "I know," Lucas said, his eyes softening. "But you have to try. You can't just ignore it. You have to understand that what we had, it was stolen from us. We can't just move on like nothing happened." Sophia looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He was different than she'd imagined. His pain, his anger, it was real. And for the first time, she wondered what it would be like to live in a world where the truth didn't come with a price. "I need some time," she whispered, stepping back from the door. "I need time to figure this out." Lucas nodded slowly, his heart heavy. "I understand, but I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here when you're ready to face this." Sophia watched him for a long moment before finally closing the door softly. She stood there, staring at the space where he had been, as the truth of his words settled into her soul like a stone sinking deep into water. Her life, everything she had believed to be true, had been turned upside down in an instant. The days that followed were torturous for Sophia. She could barely think straight, her mind consumed by the whirlwind of revelations that had been forced upon her. The life she had lived, the family she had trusted. Was it all a lie? Her parents, the people who had given her everything, who had raised her with love, now appeared to be nothing more than perpetrators of a dark crime. It was hard to even breathe, let alone process the truth Lucas had laid out before her. She had spent hours pacing around her house, the silence of her luxurious surroundings now feeling more like a prison than a sanctuary. The walls seemed to close in on her, the familiar surroundings now suffocating. Everything felt wrong. Lucas's words echoed in her mind. "They paid for you. You were sold. You've been living a life built on lies." But what did it all mean for her? Was she supposed to hate the people who raised her? Was she supposed to turn her back on everything she had ever known? Was she supposed to side with Lucas, the brother she had never known, who had suffered for years while she had lived in comfort? The more she thought about it, the more impossible it seemed to come to a decision. She needed time, but time wasn't something she had in abundance. She needed answers, but not from Lucas alone. She had to confront her parents. Finally, after days of torturous indecision, Sophia called them. Her hands were trembling as she dialed the number. She felt like she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life, but there was no other choice. The truth had to come out. "Sophia?" Her mother's voice crackled over the phone, a tone of concern in her voice. "Is everything okay?" Sophia didn't respond immediately. She couldn't find the words. Her mouth was dry, her heart racing. She had always looked up to these people, trusted them more than anyone else in the world. How could they have kept this from her? How could they have lived this lie, knowing what they had done? "Mom," Sophia began, her voice shaking. "I need to know the truth. I need to know everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and Sophia's stomach twisted with dread. She could hear her mother breathing, and then she finally spoke, her voice carefully controlled. "What are you talking about?" "Sophia," her mother asked. "What truth? You're not making any sense." Sophia took a deep breath, her pulse quickening. "I know about the adoption. I know about the agency, about the people who took me, about what you did. You You bought me. You didn't save me. I wasn't just a child in need. I was part of something else, something I don't even know how to understand." Her mother's voice was tight when she spoke again, but there was no anger in it, only a cold, distant quality that chilled Sophia to her core. "Where did you hear this?" her mother asked, her tone suddenly laced with suspicion. "I heard it from Lucas," Sophia whispered, each word falling like a weight in the silence. "He's my brother, Mom. He's been looking for me for years, and I need to know the truth. Was it all a lie? Did you really sell me?" For a long moment, there was nothing but silence on the other end of the phone, and then finally her mother spoke. The words came slow, measured, almost as if she were carefully considering every syllable. "You don't understand, Sophia. It was complicated. Things weren't what you think. Your father and we did what we thought was best. There were things we couldn't control. Her mother's voice faltered for a brief moment, but then she recovered. "You had a better life this way. We gave you a chance." A wave of nausea rose in Sophia's chest. "A better life," she repeated, her voice cracking, "by taking me from my brother, by lying to me, by turning me into a product." Her mother sighed deeply, as if she were tired, as if the weight of the years was pressing down on her. "Sophia, please. It's not what you think. We thought we were doing the right thing. Your brother. We couldn't find him. We thought he'd be better off on his own." Sophia's mind reeled. "Better off? You abandoned him, didn't you? You didn't even try to find him. You didn't even tell me I had a brother. I had a family, and I never even knew. I never knew him. You've kept me in the dark." Her mother's voice became cold now, defensive. "It wasn't that simple. Don't you dare judge us. Sophia, we did what we had to do. You have everything you need now. What else do you want from us?" Sophia's heart shattered. "I want the truth," she said quietly. "I want to know what you did. I want to know why you made the decisions you did. I want to know why you lied to me." But there was no more talking to her mother. The conversation ended abruptly, leaving Sophia standing alone in the middle of her perfect home, a place that now felt like a haunted house. Sophia dropped her phone onto the kitchen counter, her breath ragged, and she felt a tear slip down her cheek. She was no longer the person she had been before that conversation. The illusion of a perfect life had been shattered. It wasn't just her mother's lies that had torn her apart. It was the realization that she had been a part of something that had broken both her and Lucas. She had been stolen from him, and all those years spent in ignorance, those were the years they would never get back. She needed to see Lucas. She had to understand everything. She had to know how to fix this. The days after Sophia's phone call to her mother were filled with turmoil. Her mind swirled with confusion, guilt, and disbelief. The life she had known for so long had been nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. The weight of the truth was unbearable, and yet it was necessary. She couldn't ignore it any longer. The knowledge of her past, of what had been done to her and Lucas, was too heavy to bear in silence. Sophia knew she couldn't keep running from the truth. She had to face it. She had to face Lucas. It had been a week since their last confrontation, and though she had been reluctant to see him again, she couldn't escape the pull of needing to understand more. She needed to reconcile the anger, the sorrow, and the unanswered questions. One evening, as the sun began to set over the horizon, casting long shadows across the city, Sophia made her decision. She couldn't go on living in this fractured reality. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when the world had been ripped apart at its seams. She drove to the same cafe where they had first met, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as her thoughts raced. She had no idea what she was going to say to him, or how their conversation would go, but one thing was certain. It was time. Time to find the pieces of her life that had been torn apart. Time to heal. As she stepped into the cafe, the bell above the door chimed softly. Lucas was already sitting at a table by the window, his back to her, his hands resting on the table, lost in thought. He hadn't seen her enter, and for a moment Sophia hesitated. She was still unsure of how to face him, but then she reminded herself of what she had learned, what she had to do. There was no turning back now. "Lucas," she said, her voice quiet but firm. He turned around slowly, his eyes locking with hers. His face was a mixture of hope and apprehension, but it softened when he saw her standing there. Sophia could see the emotion in his eyes, the same mixture of pain and relief she was feeling. They had both been through too much to hide it now. "Hey," Lucas said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't think you'd come." Sophia took a deep breath, walking toward the table and sitting down across from him. She didn't speak at first, just let the silence settle between them. For a moment, all the words she wanted to say seemed inadequate, but then she looked him in the eye and the words came. "I know," she began, her voice trembling. "I know everything now. About you. About what happened. About our mother. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Lucas's expression hardened for a moment, the pain of their past still fresh in his eyes. But then something shifted. Something softer, something more vulnerable. He reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture that surprised both of them. It wasn't about forgiveness yet, not entirely, but it was a step toward healing. It's not your fault, Sophia, Lucas said quietly. None of this is your fault. You didn't ask for any of this. You've been through enough, just like me. But we can't change what happened. All we can do is move forward. Sophia nodded, the tears that had been threatening to fall finally breaking free. She wiped them away quickly, but Lucas didn't look away. He understood. He had been through the same pain, the same struggle, and now they were facing it together. You're right, Sophia whispered. I can't change it, but I can't just forget it either. I can't pretend like everything is fine when it's not. Neither can I, Lucas replied, his grip tightening on her hand. But maybe we don't have to forget it. Maybe we just have to accept it. We can't let our past define us, but it's a part of who we are, and I'm willing to figure out how to move forward, together. Sophia let out a breath, the weight in her chest lightening slightly. She had spent so long carrying the pain of her past, of her stolen identity, but now, here with Lucas, it felt like she was starting to let go. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time, she could see a path forward. I don't know where to start, Sophia said, her voice soft, but I want to try. I want to get to know you. I want to know who you are, what you've been through, and I want to help you find a way out of all this for both of us. Lucas's face softened with a faint smile. We'll figure it out, he said, his voice steady. It's going to take time, but we don't have to do it alone anymore. We have each other. And with those simple words, something shifted between them. The weight of years of separation, pain, and abandonment didn't vanish, but it no longer felt like a wall they couldn't climb. They had found each other in the wreckage of their lives, and now they had a chance to rebuild, together. As the evening sun sank lower, casting a warm glow over the cafe, Lucas and Sophia sat in silence, not as strangers, but as siblings who had finally found their way back to each other. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope.
Hope you enjoyed the story. Comment where you're watching from, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel.